Okay, confession time. I may or may not have told myself that I was just going to make one trick or treat bag. I only have one child, so that makes sense. But somehow I ended up with six. But in my defense, once you make one, you'll see how easy they are. Hey friends, welcome to my sewing room. My name's Becca, and today I'm going to show you how to make a simple reversible trick or treat bag using just three fabrics. One for the exterior, one for the lining, and one for the handles. There's no interfacing, no batting, and no stress. Just a fun, quick sew that you can customize to any size you want. I'll walk you through it step by step, and at the end, I'll share a few pro tips to help you personalize your bag. Add a little structure if you want it a bit sturdier, and even ways to step it up with pockets or piecing ideas. So grab your candy corn and let's get stitching. So if I'm going to make a Halloween bag, what better purpose than using some of this nightshade fabric that I may have been hoarding a bit. This is the big cameo print, and since I'm going to use a very large chunk of this, it would be really cool if I could set it up so that the cameo was on the outside of the bag. So this is going to be my exterior, this is going to be my interior, and these are going to be my handles. I'm going to take this over to my sewing machine. Excuse me, I haven't had coffee yet. I mean, I'm going to take it over to my pressing and cutting station. As I was saying, I'm going to take this over to my pressing and cutting station, and I'm going to cut a half yard of my exterior and my interior fabric, and then I'm going to cut like a 5 or 4 inch strip of this from selvage to selvage, just depending on how wide you want the handles. I'll probably cut mine at 4 inches because that's exactly 1/8 of a yard. And so if you are shopping for fabric, you don't have to tell them number of inches. You can just say, I need 1/8 of a yard of the fabric that you want for a handle. So half yard, 1/8 of a yard. I'm talking so fast right now, you probably think I've had 15 cups of coffee, but no, only half of one. Now I'm going to cut out my exterior and my interior fabric, though as I mentioned, this is a reversible tote, so really it doesn't matter. I have some directional fabric and I have a print on here that I absolutely want to make sure that I get into shot. So when I cut my yardage, I cut more than a half a yard because I want these cameos to be what is prominent. But I know that my pieces are going to be cut at 17 inches by 17 inches. So I'm going to turn them both so that the fold is towards me. I'm going to put the inside fabric on the bottom because I don't really care where it lined up. And then for the top fabric, I'm just going to make sure that roughly I've got cameos on the same side, and I'm going to lay it on top, fold it in half. And there's a reason why I chose a 17-inch cut for this. Sorry, did I say 17? I meant 16.5. Because that's the size of the biggest ruler I own. So I'm going to try to find some sort of layout of cameo that I like that gives me my 17. And so I know that this towards the fold is going to be on the side, and that's going to be on the side. I really like this one down here more, but that's going to be on the bottom. So let me see if I can fuss around with how I want to frame this. I will tell you another thing that you could do if you are up for a bit of challenge is if you really want these to be in a specific place, you could cut out a square around the cameo that you want to feature and then just piece a large border around the outside of it so that it's bigger than what you need, and then square it down to 16.5 by 16.5, putting this directly in the middle. And you know what? I think that sounds like a great idea. So I'm glutton for punishment. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to cut off more of this fabric. I'm going to cut this out, and I'm going to border it with this extra fabric so that it's probably about 17.5 inches. I'll press it, and then I'll square it down to 16.5, and I'll cut out that fabric to 16.5. Okay, yeah, let's do that. So the hardest part now is just to figure out the two cameos that I really want to feature here. My daughter loves green, so I'm kind of thinking this one would be great. And I think I've got 2 of her, so I could do 1 of each of her on both sides. And if I do this the right way, I can probably even line it up so that they're approximately in the same position. I'm just going to come in with my ruler And I'm going to try to cut that out with at least maybe like a ½ inch around all 4 sides of that cameo. You know what? We're going to give it a full inch. Once I've sewn my side borders on, I'm going to take this over to a pressing surface, and I'm just going to press the fabric away from that middle panel. Now I'm going to use this fabric to attach to the top and bottom. Now that I have both of these panels made, it's time to go square them up. And so what I'm going to do is use that big ruler to try to get this cameo in the center. I'm going to pay somewhat attention to where the center of that is so that I can get the same type of cut out of the one underneath, but they honestly don't have to be exact. And I'm going to cut 2 fabrics from my lining at the same exact size. I just want to point out one small thing before I finish putting this bag together. My panel, if you can't tell, is actually a little bit more narrow than the height because I misjudged a little bit. So it's like 15.5 inches wide by 16.5 inches tall. That is different measurements than I gave you in the project download. But the reason why I'm showing this to you is because it really doesn't matter what size you cut this to. It's going to work no matter what you do. So if you want something a little bit bigger, make your piece of fabric bigger. If you want something a bit smaller, make your fabric a bit smaller. It doesn't have to be square. It can be rectangular. It's whatever you want to do. Just keep in mind that we are going to box the corners at the bottom of the bag. So you're going to lose a little bit of height and width off of that when it goes together. And I'll show you a couple of tricks about that when we get to that step. So first thing I'm going to do is box the corners. I'm going to take all 4 of these pieces of fabric. It's just easier for me to do them all 4 at one time. And I'm going to lay them right on top of each other so that the raw edges are perfectly lined up. Now, if you want to do this one layer at a time, please be my guest. But I like to cheat, so this is what I'm doing. Then I'm going to take a small ruler and a marking utensil, and I'm going to draw a 2-inch box right down here in the corner. And then I'm going to do it on the other bottom corner. With a pair of fabric scissors, I'm going to cut through all 4 of those layers right on that line that I drew. Now that we have our corners and the bottoms cut out, we're going to take our outside fabrics and put them right sides together. And then we're going to take our inside fabrics and put those right sides together. And for both sets, we're going to take this to our sewing machine. We're going to stitch all the way down the side, all the way across the bottom, and all the way up at the top. We're not going to leave a hole for turning. We're going to turn this through the top after we put the handles in. I will probably back stitch at the top and at the end of each of my seams, and then we're going to box the corners. I made a boo-boo. I'm sewing right side to wrong side. I got to put these right sides together. So let me break out that seam ripper. This is actually kind of a teachable moment because I use my seam ripper differently than I think a few folks do, and they always ask me how I use it. So I take my seam ripper and I put the sharp end down in between the two layers into one of the stitches, and I just pop a couple of the stitches so that I have a hole in the seam. And then I can take this and put it down in here and slice all along that seam, and just like that, my seam is ripped. Let's put these right sides together this time. Once I've got this sewn together, I can get an idea of the size and shape of the bag by taking these two pieces and just folding them along that edge and laying it flat. This is going to give me an idea of how thick the side is going to be from the seam over. So this is actually going to be double that height. If this isn't what I'm looking for, if I fold it over, if this times 2 is not as big as I want it to be, then I can make this a bit bigger. The cut, I mean. Unfortunately, if you want that to be a little bit smaller, there's not much that you can do. So my recommendation for you, if you're trying to do this with your own size, is to start with a small square in the bottom, test it. If it's not big enough, then cut a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more until you get it to be the shape and size that you want. I know that this size is going to work for me because that's what I've used on my other bags. So I'm just going to set that aside. And now I'm going to come over here and I'm going to do the same thing to these two fabrics, making sure that they're right sides together. Now to box the corners, I'm just going to come over here and I'm going to open up these little holes. I'm going to spread the two layers apart and get rid of this extra little scrappy bit. And I'm just going to line them up. I want the bottom seam to go in one way and the side seam to go in another way. And I'm going to try to get those to nest nicely together. Then I'll get some clips. Hold that in place so that my hand can have a bit of a rest. I'm going to put one on either end and one directly in the middle. And then I'm going to go clip the other side too. And I like to, at this point, make sure that I keep my bottom seam going in the same direction. So my bottom seam is going to the right, my side seam needs to go to the left. Then I'm going to take this over to my sewing machine and sew with a 1/4 inch all 4 of those little holes that I just clipped together. Now we've got both of our units put together. One of these needs to be right side out and the other one needs to be inside out. So since this one's in front of me, I'm gonna turn it right side out. And at this point, you can kind of see the shape of the bag a little bit. You can see how that side is wider than what you were seeing when I was demonstrating earlier. And actually, this turns out to be perfect because the sides, I think, are going to be this fabric, and this is going to be all we see from the front. That's neat. Don't you just love it when happy accidents make it into your project? At least the good ones, not the bad ones. So before I assemble the whole thing together, I need to make my handle straps. So for that, I'm going to come in with a width of fabric that is cut at 4 inches. And then I'm going to open it up so that I have that center right here. And I am just going to cut right next to that fold. That's going to give me 2 pieces. I also like to cut off the selvages, so I'll flip this around and I'll make sure I get all of the selvages cut off. So I'm just going to cut right next to that selvage print. This ends up giving me approximately 20 inches of length, but they are both exactly the same size. For each of these, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to lay the fabric pretty side down and fold it in half. Now you can finger press this, or you can use some heat to really set that crease. Either way is fine. Then you're going to open it up and you're going to take each of these raw edges and fold them in so that they touch that first fold that you made. And you can finger press this all the way down or use some heat. Either way is fine. I do feel like doing this with my fingers first, and then after I've kind of fussed with it and gotten it exactly where I want it to go, I can come in with heat. I feel like if I press my seams with my fingers first, it makes the seams not as stubborn. So when I do this next step, if I need to adjust any of my folds or any of the fabric for any reason, maybe it's too wide on one side, too narrow on the other, I'm able to do that. So once I've got that all finger pressed, then I'm going to start in the middle. And I'm just going to fold this in half all together, and I'll put a clip here to hold that for me. And then I'm going to come all the way down the side, and I'm just going to make sure that all of that is pretty close. What I'm looking for is that the folded edge on both sides are really lined up nice and tidy. And then if they are, I'm going to come over here to my pressing surface. I'm going to start on that first fold side, and I'm just going to push the fabric over to the double folded side. And that's really going to set those seams for me. I'll do the same thing to the other side. When I first started sewing and I was making bags, I had a heck of a time getting my straps to line up nicely. I always had one side that was just a little bit thicker than the other, and it drove me absolutely batty. And so this is the method that I have picked up to make sure that they look really nice. Once I have that pressed, I'm going to take this to my sewing machine and I'm going to sew 1/8 of an inch down each side of that strap. Now, when I say 1/8 of an inch, what I actually mean is that I'm putting it into the throat of my machine and I'm lining the edge of the fabric up with a little mark that I have on the inside of my foot. And I know you can't really see that here. I don't know if it's really 1/8 of an inch, but I know it's less than 1/4 of an inch because the side of this foot is exactly 1/4 of an inch. So I'm just going to try to sew, and it's really important that you stay straight with this because you want it to look nice. So I'm going to put this into the machine. Now watch my hands as I'm feeding this all the way down. I've got them here before it's up here, and all I'm doing is steering the fabric. I want to make sure that it's going in straight. So I'm looking at a few different places to make sure that it's going in even and it's staying in this direction. That's going to keep my stitching exactly straight. I'm looking at the presser foot. I am looking at the diagonal seam tape that I have on my machine. And I'm really not even applying any pressure to this fabric. I'm just keeping it from going to the right or to the left. All of our pieces are now sewn together, so I'm going to set aside the strap. I'm going to assemble the bag. So I'm going to take them and put them right sides together. I have one that's right side out and one that is inside out. So I'm going to put the right side out one on the inside, and the inside out one is going to go on the outside. So I'm going to shake this out. I'm going to take this and put it inside that inside out bag. And then I'm going to start on the sides. I'm going to line up these seams, making sure that I'm nesting them. And I'll clip that in place. And I'm going to go directly to the other side and make sure my seams are going in opposite directions. Make them kiss because they love each other and they belong together. And clip that into place. And I'll give that a nice shaky. This is about what our bag is going to look like when it's all done, but it's time to put our handles in there. So here's how I did my handles before. The first thing I did is found the center. So I just folded this in half and gave it a bit of a crease with my finger. It didn't need to be super visible. I just needed to see a registration mark. And then I took a ruler and I measured the same distance. I'm going to do 3.5 this time because this is easier to work with. I measured the same distance on either side of that crease and just drew a line. And that registration mark is going to be where we put our straps as we're putting this together. So set that aside. I'm going to get my straps. I want to make sure that I don't twist these when I put them into the bag. So I'm going to stack them so that they are like this because when the bag comes together, I would like the handles to be nice and tidy. So I know that this is the way I'm going to insert the handles. Do you see how I'm making sure that I have them laid out the same way? They're laid out away from the middle. I'm going to try to remember that. So I'm going to take the first one. I'm going to carefully keep it the way I wanted it oriented, put it in between that first layer of fabric and the second one, and I'm going to line it up so that it is just touching that right side of my strap is just right at that registration mark that I had. And then I'll line up all of those raw edges and clippity-doo-dah. Now I'm going to do the same thing to the other side. Give that a little shake. Now I'm going to flip this over and we're going to do the same thing over here. Pick this up, make sure that my straps are twisted out away from the center. Lift up the 2 layers, gently set that inside, and now I'm going to line this up so that those straps are exactly where the other ones were, so that I've got them coming out at the same point. If I wanted to, I could measure this and mark it as well, but I can see where that strap is, so I'm just laying it right on top of that other spot. You'll also want to make sure that you're keeping your strap edge nice and straight with the edge of your fabric, and it's nice and straight going like this, otherwise you'll have crooked straps. Ask me how I know. Now the last part of this actually makes it really easy to sew together. So I'm going to find a spot in between two handles. This happens to be right side up, so this is what I'm going to use. And I'm going to draw either 1/2 inch or 1/4 of an inch or whatever my seam allowance is going to be that I'm going to sew this with. I'm just going to draw a line on both sides of that indicate where I'm going to start and stop my sewing. This is going to be the hole that I use to turn the bag right side out. So I'm going to take this over to the sewing machine and I'm going to open the bag up. If you have a free arm, this is a great use for it. I do not, so this is what I'm doing. I'm going to put the line that I just drew underneath the needle of my machine. I'm actually going to stitch on that. And when I get to the end of that line, I will keep my needle down, lift my presser foot up, and pivot 90 degrees. And now I'm going to sew all the way around to the other side. And when I get to that line, I'm going to pivot 90 degrees and sew off. When I get to one of these clips that are holding my handles in, I do backstitch a couple times just to make sure that I have got everything really nice and tidy in there. That was a side seam, so I'm not going to worry about that. I also like to take a minute to adjust the strap if it's tried to go a little sideways on me. I'm going over a strap now, so I'm going to back stitch over it a couple of times. That handle's going to get a lot of wear and tear, so I want to make sure that the bag holds up. Back over here, we're going to find that hole that we left and we're going to put our hand in there and turn the bag through this hole. Now this is a small hole because my straps are a little bit closer together. If you want to make this a little bit bigger, you can. The most important thing is that you're stitching the handles in between these layers. So if you wanted to, you could even do the side between the front and the back. That would give you a really nice big hole instead of trying to maneuver in between the handles. I'm glutton for punishment, so this is what I'm doing. These lines that I drew have stitching on them, so that's going to make it really easy to fold them in when we do our final stitch. So I'm just going to reach in here. I'm going to grab the bottom of the bag and just start pulling through that hole. Want to be a little gentle. I don't want any of my seams to pop, but I am going to have to push it through there. So make sure you're finagling the fabric. Give this a nice shake out. And if you can, you'll want to get your hand into that hole and try to push out all of the bottom corners. Wear it like a bracelet or a puppet. I'm going to do this to the inside and the outside. Just shake it out and make sure that my corners are popped out. Then try and pull my hand back out. Now I'm going to tuck the lining down inside of the bag. If I can get a handle on it. Good grief. Get in there. It don't want to go. Sometimes I just got to kind of get it started and then grab the edges of the bag and shake it out. Shake it out. Shake it out. Oh, that's so cute. My last step here is going to find that hole, and I'm going to use my fingers to line up those two folds. I'm just going to clip that hole shut, making sure to keep those raw seams nice and lined up, or those folded seams, I should say. And then I'm going to go all the way around, rolling that seam so that it's perfectly on top. The inside and the outside are nice and lined up. Our final step is going to take this over to the sewing machine, and we're going to leave the handle over here. So it's going to be to the right of our needle, and we're just going to edge stitch all the way around this entire bag. Make sure to open it up and lay it so it's flat, or if you have a free arm, use that on your machine. This is a functional but also decorative stitch. So you'll see this really pretty top stitching around the top of your bag, but it's doing two things. It's keeping the inside in, and it's also keeping the outside out. So it's keeping those layers where they need to be, but it is also helping to keep, or it is keeping rather, that hole where we turned the bag inside out nice and tidy. And because we're trimming and because we're turning it through the top of the bag, it actually makes this entirely reversible. So if you don't want the girls hanging out on the outside, you could have a flower bag. And just like that, our bag is complete, but I want to point something out. This top stitch that we did around the entire outside of the bag was functional. It wasn't just decorative. The first thing that it did, of course, was keep that hole closed where we turned the bag. But the second thing that it did is kind of defined that this is one side and this is the other side, so the fabric won't try to move on its own. If you wanted to add another layer of stitching, you absolutely could. You just need this one edge stitch, though. You don't need anything more than that. Also, because I took the time to pay attention to my straps, they are going the same way, which means they're going to lay on my shoulder exactly the way I want them to. I've got some threads to trim up, but otherwise I think this bag is ready for some trick-or-treating. But you don't have to make these just for Halloween. These can be used in a number of different ways. And so let me give you some tips and tricks that I've found that will allow you to customize this bag and use it for any occasion. And that's it, your fully reversible trick-or-treat bag. See how easy that was? No interfacing, no batting, just fabric and fun. Honestly, it's one of those projects where you finish one and immediately want to make 5 more. Ask me how I know. Before I let you go, I've got 5 pro tips to make your next one even better. So let's count them down one at a time. Number 5, if you want to add a little structure, try using some fusible fleece, foam, or batting, and make sure to quilt it to your exterior fabric first so it doesn't shift around on you. Number 4, you don't have to use a single cut of fabric for your bag. Piece together some scraps, use an orphan block, or even a fabric panel. It's a great way to personalize your bag, especially if you're quilting that outer layer. Number 3, have fun with your handles. Mix fabrics, change the length, or use leftover jelly roll strips. It's a great way to add personality. Number 2, resize it however you want. Just make sure that your exterior and lining pieces match. Bigger for books, smaller for candy, it's totally up to you. And number 1, if you really want to step this up, you can add a pocket before sewing it together. It's perfect to hold your keys, your phone, or maybe some candy stash. I can't wait to see what you make, so please make sure to tag me on social media so I can check out your versions. If this tutorial was helpful, give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe for more quilting and sewing fun. Thanks for hanging out with me in my sewing room, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!